You think I destroyed your life? Look closer, because I was the one paying for your mistakes. The rain hammers against the windows of Romano's diner on 5th Street, each drop like a gunshot in the silence between Eleanor Brooks and her son. 8 years. 8 years since she'd sat across from Michael like this, watching him fidget with his napkin the same way he did as a kid when he was nervous. But Michael Brooks isn't a kid anymore. At 34, he's all sharp edges and government-issued suspicion, his tax officer badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a shield between them. Eleanor's hands shake slightly as she reaches for her coffee. The ceramic mug feels foreign after years of plastic cups and metal trays. Prison changes you in ways you don't expect. Even something as simple as holding real dinnerware becomes a small miracle. She looks older than her 59 years. The gray streaks in her dark hair tell stories of sleepless nights in a concrete cell. Her eyes, once bright with maternal warmth, now carry the weight of betrayal and lost time. "Michael," she begins, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know this is hard, but we're family. We're all each other has left." His fork scrapes against his plate with deliberate harshness. The sound cuts through her like glass. "Family?" Michael's voice rises, drawing glances from other diners. "Mom, you were the fraud. You embezzled $2.3 million from Hale Import-Export. You ruined our name." The words hit Eleanor like physical blows. Each accusation lands with the precision of someone who's rehearsed this conversation in his head for years. "The whole department knows," Michael continues, his voice cold as winter steel. "Every time someone mentions the Brooks family, they think of corruption. Do you know what that's like? Do you know what it's like to carry that shame every single day?" Eleanor's coffee cup trembles in her grip. The diner seems to shrink around them, other conversations fading into background noise. This is the moment she's dreaded for 8 years, facing her son's contempt, his absolute certainty in her guilt. "Michael, please." "No." He slams his palm against the table, making the silverware jump. "You destroyed everything. Dad's memory, our reputation, my career prospects, everything." Something snaps inside Eleanor. The carefully constructed wall she's built around her pain crumbles in an instant. Her eyes flash with a fury that's been building for nearly a decade. "You think I destroyed your life?" The words explode from her lips like bullets. "Look closer, because I was the one paying for your mistakes." Michael's face goes white. The diner falls silent around them. Eleanor reaches into her worn leather purse with shaking hands. She pulls out a manila envelope, yellowed with age, and creased from being hidden for years. Documents spill across the table like fallen leaves. "Richard Hale," she says, her voice gaining strength with each word. "Your precious, untouchable boss. He's the one who embezzled that money. He's the one who destroyed families and ruined lives." Michael stares at the papers as if they might bite him. "These are bank transfers," Eleanor continues, spreading the documents across the sticky diner table. "Payments to offshore accounts, all signed with Richard's authorization codes, all backdated to look like my transactions." Her finger traces over faded signatures and altered timestamps. He needed a scapegoat when the federal investigation started closing in. Someone with access to the books, someone who trusted him completely. Eleanor's laugh is bitter as winter wind. Someone stupid enough to believe her boss when he said he was protecting her. Michael's hands hover over the documents, not quite touching them, as if they're radioactive. "This is impossible," he whispers, but his voice lacks conviction. "Richard fabricated evidence," Eleanor says, her words coming faster now. 8 years of suppressed truth pouring out like water through a broken dam. "He had months to prepare while I was arrested. He moved money through dummy corporations, created false electronic trails, even forged my signature on transfer orders." She pulls out a photograph, grainy, but clear enough to show Richard Hale meeting with unknown men in expensive suits outside a Chicago bank. "He thought he was so clever, but I kept copies of everything, hidden them where no one would think to look." Michael's breathing becomes shallow. The rigid certainty he's carried for 8 years starts to crack. Why didn't you tell me this before? He asks, his voice suddenly small, vulnerable. Eleanor's eyes fill with tears she's held back for too long. Because you never asked. Because the moment I was arrested, you decided I was guilty. Because every time I called from prison, you hung up on me. The silence stretches between them like a chasm. Other diners pretend not to stare while their untouched meals grow cold. Michael stands abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum floor. His face is a mask of confusion and dawning horror. I need to. He stops, unable to finish the sentence. Michael, wait. But he's already pushing through the diner door, documents clutched in his fist, disappearing into the rain-soaked Chicago night. Eleanor sits alone at the table, surrounded by the wreckage of 8 years of silence. Outside, storm clouds gather with the promise of worse weather ahead. She doesn't know that 20 blocks away, Michael is already dialing Richard Hale's private number. She doesn't know that Richard, comfortable in his penthouse office, is about to receive the phone call that will change everything. She doesn't know that her moment of truth has just set in motion a chain of events that will either destroy them all or finally give her the justice she's been waiting for. The storm outside is nothing compared to what's coming. The steel door slams shut with a sound that echoes through your bones. Eleanor Brooks, prisoner number 47291, stands in the doorway of cell block D, clutching a thin mattress and a toothbrush that's seen better days. It's March 2016. She's 51 years old, and this concrete box will be home for the next 8 years. The whispers start immediately. In prison, your crime follows you like a shadow, and financial fraud carries a special kind of stigma. You're not just a criminal, you're the kind of criminal who steals from working families. Look what we got here, sneers Maria Santos from the top bunk across the corridor. Another rich lady who couldn't keep her hands out of the cookie jar. Eleanor says nothing. She's learned that silence is sometimes the only dignity you can preserve. The other women circle like wolves, sensing weakness. To them, she represents everything they despise: privilege, education, the kind of white-collar crime that lands you in minimum security instead of the violent ward. 2.3 million, calls out Rebecca Walsh, a woman with prison tattoos crawling up her arms. That's what the news said. 2.3 million from hardworking people. Eleanor folds her state, issued uniform with precise movements. Each crease is perfect, controlled. It's the only control she has left. But here's what they don't see in those first brutal weeks. Here's what the news cameras and the courtroom spectators missed entirely. Every month, like clockwork, Eleanor Brooks sends 75% of her prison wages to an account she set up for Michael. $23 from her monthly $30 paycheck from the prison laundry goes straight to her son. She skips commissary privileges. No extra soap, no better food, no phone time beyond her allocated minutes. Everything goes to Michael's education fund, his apartment deposit, his car payments. The other inmates mock her for eating the same flavorless oatmeal every morning while they buy honey buns and instant coffee with their earnings. They don't understand that every dollar she saves is a dollar toward her son's future. Brooks thinks she's too good for commissary food. Maria laughs during lunch in the common area, still playing the saint, even in here. Eleanor continues eating her regulation meal in silence. Her hands are steady, but inside, her heart breaks a little more each day. Then comes the night that changes everything. It's November 2017, 18 months into her sentence. Eleanor hears sobbing from the cell 2 doors down, raw, desperate sounds that cut through the usual nighttime noise of the ward. She finds Tanya Washington curled up on her bunk, shaking with withdrawal and rage. 45 years old, convicted on drug charges that should have gotten her treatment instead of prison time. The system failed her the same way it failed Eleanor, just with different weapons. They're going to transfer me to maximum security, Tanya whispers, her voice hoarse from crying. Some girl in the yard said I threatened her, but I didn't. I swear on my daughter's life I didn't. Eleanor sits on the edge of the narrow bunk, She knows that look, the hollow desperation of someone who's been crushed by forces beyond their control. Tell me exactly what happened, Eleanor says quietly. Over the next 2 hours, Eleanor listens to Tanya's story. A setup, false accusations, the same pattern of manipulation Eleanor knows all too well. The next morning, Eleanor does something that surprises everyone, including herself. She marches straight to the warden's office and requests a formal hearing on Tanya's behalf. I know something about false evidence, Eleanor tells Warden Patricia Hayes, her voice steady and professional. And I know something about being railroaded by people in power. She spends 3 days preparing Tanya's defense, using her accounting skills to trace inconsistencies in witness statements and timeline discrepancies in the incident reports. The hearing lasts 40 minutes. Eleanor presents her case with the precision of a seasoned attorney, dismantling the accusations piece by piece until even the skeptical board members are nodding in agreement. Tanya's transfer is canceled. Her record is cleared. That night, Tanya finds Eleanor in the library, hunched over books on financial literacy that she's checked out for other inmates. Why did you do that for me? Tanya asks, genuine confusion in her voice. Eleanor looks up from a basic budgeting manual she's preparing for a woman getting out next month. Because someone should have done it for me, she says simply. From that moment, something shifts in cell block D. Eleanor becomes the woman you go to when the system tries to cheat you. She helps inmates understand their legal documents, teaches them how to manage money for when they get out, and fights bureaucratic battles against guards who abuse their power. Tanya becomes her closest ally and fiercest protector. She watches Eleanor's back in the yard, shares her commissary purchases, when Eleanor insists on sending every penny to Michael, and listens to the stories about a son who won't take her phone calls. Your boy doesn't know what he's got, Tanya says one evening, as they watch the sunset through the barred windows. Most kids in here would kill to have a mama like you. Eleanor's eyes fill with tears. She's become expert at hiding. He thinks I'm a criminal, she whispers. He thinks I stole from innocent people to buy myself fancy things. Tanya's hand finds Eleanor's shoulder, strong and warm. Truth has a way of coming out, she says, with the wisdom of someone who's survived worse storms. And when it does, you're going to be ready. Eleanor doesn't know it yet, but Tanya is already planning for that day, already thinking about Chicago, where her cousin runs a small business, and where 2 women who've been broken by the system might finally have a chance to rebuild. The transformation is gradual, but unmistakable. The woman who entered cell block D as a victim emerges 8 years later as a leader, still dignified, still heartbroken, but no longer broken. Prison tried to destroy Eleanor Brooks. Instead, it forged her into steel. Michael Brooks stands outside the gleaming glass tower that houses Hale Import-Export, his hand still gripping the documents from dinner. The rain has stopped, but water drips from the building's edges like tears. He's been standing here for 20 minutes, trying to work up the courage to go inside. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor feels like ascending into another world. Richard Hale's corner office overlooks the entire Chicago skyline, a monument to success built on other people's suffering. Richard doesn't look up when Michael enters. He's signing contracts with the casual indifference of a man who's never doubted his own power. Michael, Richard says without raising his eyes. Working late tonight? Dedication like that will take you far in government service. Michael's voice comes out smaller than he intended. Mr. Hale, I need to ask you something. Now Richard looks up, his smile sharp as a blade. At 62, he's perfected the art of looking trustworthy while being anything but. Silver hair, expensive suit, eyes that never quite match his smile. Of course, always happy to help the son of a former employee. Michael spreads the documents across Richard's mahogany desk. His hands shake slightly as he points to the signatures and bank transfers. Did you set her up? The silence stretches like a taut wire. Richard's expression doesn't change, but something cold flickers behind his eyes. Then he laughs. Rich, hearty laughter that fills the enormous office. Oh, Michael, Richard says, shaking his head with mock sympathy. Your mother really did a number on you, didn't she? He picks up one of the documents, examining it with theatrical interest. These are the desperate fabrications of a broken woman who can't accept responsibility for her crimes. Richard's voice carries the authority of someone accustomed to being believed without question. She spent 8 years in prison, Michael. 8 years with criminals and con artists. Do you really think she came out the same person who went in? Michael feels the ground shifting beneath him. The certainty he felt at the diner starts to crumble. But the signatures can be forged by anyone with basic computer skills, Richard interrupts smoothly. Your mother was always clever with numbers. Prison probably gave her plenty of time to get creative with documents, too. Richard stands and walks to his floor-to-ceiling windows, gazing out at the city lights like a king surveying his kingdom. I understand this is painful, he continues, his voice softening with practiced compassion. No one wants to believe their mother is capable of such betrayal, but sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Michael stares at the documents scattered across the desk. They looked so convincing an hour ago. Now they seem like the desperate lies of a woman who's lost everything. She seemed so sure, Michael whispers. Richard turns back with a paternal smile. Desperation can make anyone convincing, son. Your mother embezzled $2.3 million from hardworking families. The evidence was overwhelming. 12 jurors agreed. Michael gathers the documents with numb fingers. The certainty, the brief moment of hope that maybe, just maybe, his mother had been telling the truth, it all evaporates like steam. I'm sorry I bothered you, Mr. Hale. No bother at all, Richard says, already turning back to his contracts. Give my regards to your mother. I hope she finds the help she needs. The elevator ride down feels like falling into a pit. Michael walks through the lobby in a daze, past security guards and marble columns that suddenly seem like monuments to his own stupidity. Outside, the Chicago streets are slick with rain and neon reflections. Michael drives home through empty intersections, the documents on his passenger seat like evidence of his own gullibility. Meanwhile, Eleanor sits in her sparse apartment, staring at the phone that hasn't rung since Michael stormed out. The silence is deafening. She knows that look in her son's eyes. She's seen it before, the moment when doubt creeps in, when Richard's silver tongue starts working its poison magic. A knock at her door breaks the crushing quiet. Girl, you look like somebody died, Tanya Washington announces, bustling into the apartment with 2 cups of coffee and a bag of donuts. She's dressed in her work uniform blue coveralls from the auto shop, where she's been building a new life. Eleanor tries to smile. Michael confronted Richard tonight. Tanya sets down the coffee and gives Eleanor a look that could melt steel. And let me guess. That smooth-talking snake convinced your boy that you're still the villain. Eleanor nods, unable to trust her voice. Tanya plops down on the second-hand couch and tears open the donut bag with characteristic enthusiasm. Honey, you survived prison food for 8 years. You can survive your son's ego. Despite everything, Eleanor almost smiles. It's not that simple, Tanya. Sure it is, Tanya says, around a bite of chocolate glazed. Your boy's been carrying that guilt for 8 years, thinking his mama was a criminal. That's a heavy load. Takes time to set it down, even when you want to. She reaches over and squeezes Eleanor's hand. But words ain't gonna cut it anymore. That man Richards had years to perfect his lies. You need something that can't be explained away. Eleanor looks out her window at the city that once felt like home and now feels like a battlefield. I don't know how to prove what I can't prove. Then we don't prove it, Tanya says, her eyes gleaming with the kind of dangerous intelligence that got her through 15 years of hard living. We make him prove it himself. She pulls out her phone and starts scrolling through contacts. My cousin Deshawn still works security at that fancy building downtown. And my girl Monica cleans offices on the weekends. Eleanor stares at her friend. Tanya, what are you thinking? I'm thinking Richard Hale's been untouchable for too long, Tanya says, her smile sharp as broken glass. I'm thinking a man that comfortable with lying has probably got more lies tucked away somewhere. She stands up and starts pacing the small apartment like a general, planning a war. And I'm thinking it's time we reminded him that some people don't stay down when you knock them over. Eleanor feels something stirring in her chest. Not hope exactly, but something harder. Something that tastes like justice with a bite of revenge. For the first time since her release, Eleanor Brooks stops thinking like a victim. She starts thinking like a hunter. Richard Hale sits behind his mahogany desk, staring at his phone long after Michael Brooks has left. The documents scattered across his office suddenly feel like ticking bombs. He's built his empire on the foundation of Eleanor's destruction. Every contract, every deal, every dollar of profit has been possible because she took the fall for his crimes. Now she's talking. And talking means questions. Questions mean investigations. Investigations mean the end of everything. Richard picks up his phone and dials a number he hasn't used in years. "Vincent," he says when a gravelly voice answers. "I need you to handle a problem." Eleanor doesn't notice the black sedan following her home from the grocery store. After 8 years in prison, you'd think she'd be more aware of threats, but freedom has made her careless. She carries her single bag of groceries up 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, keys jingling as she fumbles with the locks. The hallway smells like disinfectant and other people's dinners. The next morning, she notices the same sedan parked across from her building. Different spot, same car, same 2 men in the front seats pretending to read newspapers. By the 3rd day, Eleanor's prison instincts kick back in. Someone is watching her, and in her experience, people who watch you rarely have good intentions. She starts taking different routes to the small bookkeeping job she's found at a community center. She varies her schedule, shops at different stores, even changes which laundromat she uses. But the sedan is always there. Sometimes a block away, sometimes closer, but always there like a shadow she can't shake. Friday evening, Eleanor stays late at the community center to finish updating their budget spreadsheets. The work is simple but satisfying, helping a nonprofit stretch every dollar to serve more families. When she finally leaves, the sun has already set. The parking lot behind the building is poorly lit, with half the streetlights flickering or burned out completely. Eleanor fumbles for her car keys, her breath visible in the cold air. October in Chicago bites with the promise of winter. That's when she hears the footsteps. 2 men emerge from between the parked cars, like predators who've been waiting for exactly this moment. They're big, professional, the kind of men who hurt people for money. "Eleanor Brooks," the taller one says. "It's not a question." Eleanor's keys slip from her fingers, clattering against the asphalt. The sound echoes in the empty lot like gunshots. "Mr. Hale wants to have a conversation with you," the second man says, moving to block her path to the car. Eleanor's mind races through her options. Scream, but who would hear her in this deserted lot? Run, but they're younger and faster. Fight, but she's 59 and they're trained killers. "I don't have anything to say to Richard Hale," she manages, surprised by how steady her voice sounds. "That's unfortunate," the tall man says, reaching inside his jacket, "because he has something to say to you." Eleanor closes her eyes, thinking of Michael. At least he'll never know how this ended. At least he won't have to carry the guilt of her death along with everything else. The sound of squealing tires cuts through the night like a banshee's wail. Tanya's beat-up Honda Civic comes roaring around the corner, headlights blazing. She aims the car straight at the 2 men, who dive away from Eleanor in opposite directions. "Get in!" Tanya screams through her open window. Eleanor doesn't hesitate. She vaults over the hood of a parked car and throws herself into Tanya's passenger seat as her friend floors the accelerator. Behind them, the 2 men are shouting into their phones, but they're on foot, and Tanya drives like a woman possessed. "How did you know?" Eleanor gasps, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Been watching your back for 3 days, Tanya says, taking a corner on 2 wheels. "Prison taught me to smell trouble before it arrives." They drive in silence for several minutes, taking random turns and doubling back on side streets until Tanya is satisfied they're not being followed. "We can't go back to your apartment," Tanya says, finally slowing to a normal speed. "Or mine. Richard's got money and connections. He'll find us." Eleanor stares out the window at the Chicago skyline, her hands still shaking from adrenaline. "So what do we do?" Tanya grins, and for the first time since prison, Eleanor sees her friend's smile reach her eyes. "We go to my cousin Deshawn in Chicago proper. And I mean the real Chicago, not these suburbs. We disappear into the South Side where rich white boys like Richard Hale don't have any power." 4 hours later, they're sitting in Deshawn Washington's kitchen, drinking coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Deshawn is built like a linebacker but speaks with the gentle precision of a man who's seen too much violence. "Tanya told me about your situation," he says, sliding a business card across the scarred kitchen table. "Detective Maria Santos, Chicago PD Financial Crimes. She's good people, honest, and she's got a particular hatred for rich folks who think they're above the law." Eleanor picks up the card with fingers that are finally steady again. Will she believe me? With the evidence you've got, she'll more than believe you. She'll help you bury that bastard so deep he'll need a mining crew to dig himself out. Tanya reaches over and squeezes Eleanor's hand. "You don't have to do this alone anymore." For the first time in 8 years, Eleanor Brooks allows herself to laugh. Really laugh. From the bottom of her soul. It starts as a chuckle and builds into something wild and free, echoing through Deshawn's kitchen like music. When the laughter finally subsides, Eleanor looks at her two friends, one she found in the depths of prison, one she's just met but already trusts. "I'm tired of running," she says, her voice carrying a strength that surprises even her. "I'm tired of hiding and being afraid and letting Richard Hale control my life from his ivory tower." She stands up, straightening to her full height for the first time since her release. "I want justice, real justice, not just for me, but for every person that man has destroyed." Tanya grins like a wolf. "Now you're talking my language." Eleanor Brooks has spent 8 years as a victim. Tonight, she becomes something else entirely. Tonight, she becomes dangerous. The storage unit smells like dust and forgotten dreams. Eleanor stands in the doorway, staring at boxes she hasn't seen in 8 years, the remnants of her former life, packed away when she was sentenced. Tanya holds a flashlight while Eleanor sorts through cardboard containers marked in her own careful handwriting. Personal files, tax records, work documents 2014-2016. "Most people would have thrown this stuff out by now," Tanya observes, watching Eleanor's hands shake as she opens the first box. "I'm not most people," Eleanor replies. "I'm an accountant. We keep everything." The kitchen table in Deshawn's apartment becomes their war room. Under a single hanging lamp that casts long shadows across the worn wood, Eleanor spreads out ledgers and financial documents like a general planning a battle. These aren't the sanitized reports Richard presented to investigators. These are the raw records, the day-to-day transactions that tell the real story of Hale import-export. Eleanor's reading glasses slide down her nose as she traces columns of numbers with her finger. Each entry is a breadcrumb leading back to the truth. "Here," she says, tapping a series of transfers from March 2015. "Look at these payments to Cayman Holdings Limited. $500,000, marked as consulting fees." Tanya peers over her shoulder. "What's Cayman Holdings?" "A shell company Richard created to launder money offshore." "But look at the authorization codes." Eleanor circles the signatures with a red pen. RH 7000, 749. That's Richard's personal authorization. Not mine. The evidence builds like a house of cards in reverse, each new document making the structure stronger instead of more fragile. Payments to fake vendors, inflated shipping costs, mysterious consulting fees to companies that exist only on paper. The son of a bitch was running a money laundering operation right under the FBI's nose, Eleanor whispers, her voice filled with a mixture of awe and rage. "And he used my access codes to cover his tracks." Tanya makes coffee at 2 in the morning while Eleanor continues her forensic accounting. The numbers dance before her eyes, but she pushes through the fatigue. This is what she was trained for. This is what she's good at. Eleanor, Tanya says softly, setting down a steaming mug. You need to rest. I need to finish this, Eleanor replies without looking up. Richard's had 8 years to perfect his story. I need mine to be bulletproof. By dawn, the kitchen table looks like a detective's evidence board. Financial records, bank statements, shipping manifests, and corporate documents create a paper trail that leads straight to Richard Hale's door. Eleanor sits back in her chair, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time in 8 years, she's not running from her past, she's weaponizing it. We've got him, she says, her voice barely above a whisper. Meanwhile, 20 miles away, Michael Brooks sits in his government office cubicle, staring at a computer screen that might as well be showing him a foreign language. He's supposed to be reviewing tax compliance reports for local businesses, but his mind keeps drifting to his mother's documents. The ones he dismissed so easily in Richard's office now seem less like desperate fabrications. Michael pulls up the Hale import-export file on his computer. As a tax officer, he has access to their corporate filings going back 10 years. It's not illegal to look, it's his job. But something about this search feels like betrayal. The first irregularity jumps out immediately. A consulting payment to a Bermuda-based company for logistics optimization services. $3 million for services that have no paper trail, no deliverables, no evidence of any actual work performed. Michael's stomach clenches. He knows what this looks like. He's seen enough tax evasion cases to recognize the pattern. He digs deeper, cross-referencing payments with shipping records and employee payrolls. The picture that emerges makes him sick to his stomach. Richard Hale has been systematically looting his own company for years, using a network of shell corporations and offshore accounts to hide millions in stolen funds. And according to these records, the scheme started in 2014, 2 years before his mother was arrested. Michael's hands hover over his keyboard, paralyzed by the implications. If these numbers are accurate, then everything he believed about his mother is wrong. Everything he said to her at dinner was a lie built on lies. His desk phone rings, making him jump. Brooks? He answers automatically. Michael, it's Richard. I need to see you in my office immediately. The line goes dead before Michael can respond. He stares at his computer screen for a long moment, then closes the Hale import-export files and locks his workstation. The elevator ride to Richard's office feels like ascending to his own execution. Richard is waiting by his windows when Michael enters, his back turned to the door. The city sprawls below them like a kingdom built on other people's suffering. You've been digging into my company's files, Richard says without turning around. It's not a question. Michael's mouth goes dry. It's part of my job to... It's part of your job to follow orders and keep your nose out of places it doesn't belong. Richard turns around slowly, his eyes cold as winter steel. Your mother has been filling your head with poisonous lies, hasn't she? I was just doing routine compliance checks. You were looking for evidence to support a convicted felon's fantasy. Richard's voice drops to a whisper that somehow sounds more threatening than shouting. That's not just unprofessional, Michael. That's dangerous. The threat hangs in the air between them like smoke. Michael realizes that he's standing at a crossroads that will define the rest of his life. He can walk away, forget what he's seen, continue living the comfortable lie that shaped his adult life, or he can take one more step down the rabbit hole and discover just how deep the corruption goes. Michael Brooks thinks about his mother, sitting alone in her apartment, carrying the weight of his accusations along with her own pain. For the first time in 8 years, he wonders if he's been wrong about everything. I need to get back to work, Michael says quietly. Richard smiles, but his eyes remain cold. Yes, you do. And Michael, I trust this conversation will remain between us. Michael nods and walks toward the door, every step feeling like a betrayal of someone. He just can't figure out who. The call comes at midnight. Richard Hale sits in his penthouse office, city lights glittering below like fallen stars. His hands shake as he dials Vincent's number. "The woman is becoming a problem," Richard says, his voice tight with desperation. "The kind of problem that requires a permanent solution." Vincent's gravelly laugh echoes through the phone. "Should have let me handle this properly the first time, boss." "She has documents, evidence, things that could destroy everything I've built." Richard's reflection in the window looks like a stranger, haunted, desperate, nothing like the confident businessman who destroyed Eleanor's life 8 years ago. "Where is she?" "South Side. My sources say she's staying with contacts there." But Vincent Richards' voice drops to a whisper. "Make it look like an accident." Eleanor can't sleep. She sits by the window in Deshawn's guest room, watching shadows move between the streetlights. Tomorrow, she meets with Detective Santos. Tomorrow, she finally gets her chance at justice. But tonight feels different, dangerous, like a storm gathering on the horizon. She's learned to trust her instincts. Prison teaches you that survival depends on sensing trouble before it arrives. A text message lights up her phone. "Mom, I need to see you. It's urgent. Meet me at Riverside Park, near the old pier. Come alone. Michael." Eleanor stares at the message for a long time. Something about it feels wrong. Michael hasn't called her mom in 8 years. He's never asked to meet her anywhere, let alone at midnight. But what if he's finally ready to listen? What if he's discovered the truth on his own? Against every instinct screaming danger, Eleanor grabs her coat. Riverside Park at midnight is a different world than during the day. Shadows stretch like fingers between the trees, and the Chicago River flows past like black oil under the moonlight. Eleanor walks toward the old pier, her footsteps echoing on the wooden boardwalk. The air smells like river water and urban decay. "Michael," she calls softly, "are you here?" Footsteps emerge from the darkness, but they don't belong to her son. Richard Hale steps into the pale light of a flickering street lamp, no longer the polished businessman she once knew. His expensive suit is wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled. His eyes hold the wild desperation of a cornered animal. "Hello, Eleanor." Eleanor's blood turns to ice. "Where's Michael?" "Safe," Richard says, pulling a gun from his jacket with hands that shake like autumn leaves. "For now." The weapon looks enormous in the dim light, like a black hole that could swallow the world. "You should have stayed quiet," Richard continues, his voice cracking with strain. "You should have accepted your punishment and disappeared, but you had to come back. You had to start digging." Eleanor takes a step backward, her mind racing. The pier extends into the river behind her, nowhere to run. 8 years wasn't enough for you," she says, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "You needed to destroy me completely." "You destroyed yourself." Richard's composure finally cracks, revealing the monster beneath. "You and your obsessive record-keeping, your moral superiority. Do you have any idea what you've cost me?" The gun wavers in his grip, and Eleanor realizes he's more afraid than she is. Desperate men make mistakes. She just needs to stay alive long enough for him to make one. "The FBI is already investigating," she lies smoothly. "Killing me won't change that." "Maybe not," Richard admits. "But it will buy me time to disappear. And it will finally give me the satisfaction of watching you pay for ruining my life." He raises the gun, pointing it directly at her heart. Eleanor closes her eyes, thinking of Michael. At least he'll never know she died believing he hated her. At least he'll be safe from Richard's reach. The sound of running footsteps breaks the night's silence. "Mom!" Eleanor's eyes snap open to see Michael sprinting toward them across the pier, his face a mask of terror and determination. Richard spins toward the sound, the gun swinging wildly. "Michael, no!" Eleanor screams, but her son doesn't slow down. Time moves like honey. Eleanor watches Michael launch himself between her and Richard just as the gun explodes with sound and light. The bullet catches Michael in the chest, spinning him around like a dancer. He falls backward into Eleanor's arms, his eyes wide with shock, and something else, something that looks almost like peace. "Mom," he whispers, blood frothing at the corners of his mouth. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. Eleanor sinks to her knees, cradling her son against her chest. His breathing is shallow, labored, each breath a monumental effort. Don't talk, she whispers, tears streaming down her face. Help is coming. You're going to be okay. But they both know it's a lie. The blood spreading across Michael's shirt tells a different story. I found the records, Michael gasps, pressing a USB drive into Eleanor's hand with fingers that are already growing cold. Everything. All of it. The real evidence. His eyes find hers one last time, and Eleanor sees the little boy she raised, the man she loved despite everything, the son who finally came home. I never stopped loving you, he whispers. Then Michael Brooks is gone, his weight growing heavy in her arms. Eleanor looks up to find Richard standing over them, the gun still smoking in his trembling hands. His face is a mask of horror at what he's done. I didn't mean, he starts to say. Eleanor's grief transforms into something else, something primal and burning and absolutely lethal. She rises slowly, still holding her son's body, her eyes never leaving Richard's face. You killed my child, she says, her voice carrying the weight of 8 years of injustice and a lifetime of lost love. In the distance, sirens wail through the Chicago night, growing closer with each passing second. Richard looks at the gun in his hands as if he's never seen it before, then turns and runs into the darkness like the coward he's always been. But Eleanor doesn't watch him go. She holds her son and lets herself feel the full weight of her fury. Justice is coming, and it will have her face. The USB drive is small enough to fit in Eleanor's palm, but it weighs like the world. Michael's blood still stains the plastic casing, a crimson reminder of the price her son paid for the truth. She sits in the sterile waiting room of the Cook County morgue, waiting to identify her child's body. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead like angry wasps, and the smell of antiseptic can't quite mask the underlying odor of death. Tanya sits beside her, holding Eleanor's free hand while she clutches the USB drive with the other. They haven't spoken in 2 hours. What words could possibly be adequate? Mrs. Brooks? A young officer approaches with careful steps, as if the floor might crack beneath his weight. We found this in your son's apartment. It appears to be a legal document. He hands her an envelope marked Last Will and Testament of Michael James Brooks, in her son's careful handwriting. The paper shakes in her trembling fingers as she breaks the seal. The letter is brief, written in the precise language of a man who chose his final words carefully. Mom, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you know the truth about Richard Hale. I've been investigating him for weeks, and I finally understand what he did to you, what he did to us. Eleanor's tears blur the ink, but she continues reading. I was wrong about everything. Wrong about you, wrong about Richard, wrong about what kind of man I wanted to be. You spent 8 years in prison for crimes you didn't commit, while I spent 8 years hating you for crimes Richard Hale committed. The next paragraph breaks Eleanor's heart all over again. I can't undo the damage I caused with my silence and my judgment. But maybe I can help you find justice. The USB drive contains everything: bank records, emails, recorded phone conversations, even security footage from Richard's office that I copied from the building's servers. Tanya squeezes Eleanor's hand as she reads the final lines. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry for not believing you, for not fighting for you, for wasting 8 years we could have spent healing together. Make this right. Show the world who Richard Hale really is. I love you. Your son, Michael. Eleanor folds the letter carefully and slides it back into the envelope. When she looks up, her eyes are dry, and her voice is steady as steel. We're going to the FBI, she tells Tanya, today. The federal building in Chicago towers over the surrounding streets like a monument to justice. Eleanor and Tanya sit in Special Agent Rebecca Martinez's office, the USB drive and Michael's letter spread across the desk like evidence in a murder trial. Agent Martinez has been with financial crimes for 15 years, but even she seems impressed by the scope of Richard's corruption. Your son was thorough, she says, scrolling through files on her computer. He's documented a money laundering operation that spans 3 countries and involves at least 20 shell companies. She clicks on an audio file. Richard's voice fills the room, recorded during what he thought was a private phone call. Vincent, I need that Brooks woman eliminated permanently. She's got documents that could put me away for life. Make it look accidental. A mugging gone wrong. Maybe a car accident. I don't care how you do it, just make sure she can't testify. Eleanor's hands clench into fists. Hearing Richard order her death in his own voice makes it real in a way she hadn't expected. We have enough here to arrest him on charges of murder, conspiracy, money laundering, and fraud, Agent Martinez continues. But I want to make sure we get everything. 1 raid, 1 arrest, no chance for him to destroy additional evidence. How long? Eleanor asks. 48 hours, Martinez replies. Maybe less. Eleanor nods. After 8 years, she can wait 2 more days. The raid happens at dawn on a Tuesday morning. Eleanor watches from across the street as black SUVs surround the Hale Import-Export building like predators, circling wounded prey. FBI agents in tactical gear pour through every entrance simultaneously. The building's security system, designed to keep intruders out, now traps Richard inside. Eleanor imagines him in his penthouse office, watching his empire crumble through floor-to-ceiling windows that suddenly feel more like prison bars. Her phone buzzes with a text from Agent Martinez. We have him. 20 minutes later, Richard Hale emerges from his building in handcuffs. Gone is the polished businessman who destroyed her life. This man looks broken, diminished, his expensive suit wrinkled and his silver hair disheveled. His eyes dart frantically as news cameras capture every moment of his downfall. This is a mistake, Richard shouts at the reporters who surge forward like vultures. I'm innocent. This is all lies spread by a convicted felon. Even now, he's trying to shift blame. Even facing overwhelming evidence, he can't accept responsibility for his crimes. Agent Martinez appears beside the FBI vehicles, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. Richard Hale is being charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, fraud, and obstruction of justice. The investigation is ongoing. Richard's legs buckle as the agents guide him into the back of a federal transport vehicle. Through the reinforced glass, Eleanor can see him mouthing denials that no one believes anymore. The vehicle pulls away, carrying Richard toward the same fate he orchestrated for Eleanor 8 years ago. The only difference is that his guilt isn't fabricated. Eleanor feels Tanya's arm around her shoulders as they watch justice finally being served. How does it feel? Tanya asks quietly. Eleanor considers the question. She expected to feel triumphant, vindicated, satisfied by Richard's arrest. Instead, she feels something deeper and more complex. Empty, she admits. Michael should be here to see this. He should be here to know that his sacrifice meant something. She looks down at the USB drive still clutched in her palm, Michael's blood now dried to a rusty brown. But he is here, she continues, her voice growing stronger. He's in every file on this drive, every recorded conversation, every piece of evidence that's going to put Richard away forever. Eleanor slips the USB drive into her pocket and takes one last look at the building where her nightmare began. Tomorrow, she starts building a new life. Tonight, she mourns her son and celebrates his redemption. Justice, she realizes, tastes like tears and feels like coming home. The courtroom is packed with reporters, federal agents, and faces. Eleanor doesn't recognize victims of Richard's schemes who've waited years for this moment. She sits in the front row, Tanya beside her, watching justice finally unfold. Judge Patricia Williams reads the verdict with the gravity it deserves. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Michael Brooks, we find the defendant guilty. Richard Hale sits motionless at the defense table, his expensive suit unable to hide the fact that he's become exactly what he tried to make Eleanor, a convicted criminal. On the charges of conspiracy, money laundering, fraud, and obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty on all counts. The gavel falls with finality. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Richard will die behind bars, just as he intended for Eleanor to die on that pier. Eleanor feels no triumph, only a profound sense of completion. The scales have finally balanced. Outside the courthouse, Agent Martinez shakes Eleanor's hand with genuine warmth. "Your son would be proud," she says simply. Eleanor nods, unable to trust her voice. Michael's sacrifice exposed a criminal network that destroyed dozens of lives and stole millions of dollars. His death saved others from Richard's poison. The funeral is small but meaningful. Eleanor stands at Michael's graveside in Graceland Cemetery, surrounded by his colleagues from the tax office and a few neighbors who knew him as the quiet, conscientious man he'd become. Pastor Williams speaks about redemption and the courage it takes to admit when you've been wrong. He reads from Michael's letter, his voice carrying across the autumn wind. Michael Brooks died, saving his mother's life, the pastor says. But perhaps more importantly, he died knowing he had found his way back to love. Eleanor places a single white rose on the mahogany casket. "I forgive you," she whispers, "for everything. And I know you forgave me long before you saved my life." The earth is cold beneath her knees, but her heart feels lighter than it has in 8 years. 3 months later, Eleanor stands in the doorway of a small office space on North Clark Street. The sign in the window reads, "Brooks Financial Consulting, helping small businesses navigate complex finances." It's not much 3 rooms above a coffee shop, secondhand furniture, and a computer Tanya helped her pick out. But it's hers, built with her skills, her reputation slowly being rebuilt, and her determination to help people who can't afford the big accounting firms. Her first client is Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman whose son's restaurant is struggling with tax compliance. Eleanor spends 2 hours explaining depreciation schedules and quarterly payments, charging only what Mrs. Chen can afford. "You are so patient," Mrs. Chen says as she leaves, clutching the organized files Eleanor prepared for her. "My son will be so relieved." That evening, Eleanor and Tanya share dinner at their favorite diner, not Romano's, with its bitter memories, but a warm neighborhood place where the waitress knows their names and the coffee is always fresh. "Look at you, all professional and successful," Tanya teases, but her pride is genuine. "My girl's got her own business and everything." "Our girl," Eleanor corrects with a smile. "None of this would exist without you." Tanya raises her coffee mug in a mock toast. "Here's to surviving prison, catching bad guys, and starting over at 60. "I'm 59, Eleanor protests, laughing. "Not for long," Tanya grins. "And speaking of getting older, when are you going to give that lawyer man a real chance?" Eleanor blushes despite herself. David Kellerman, former public defender turned small practice attorney, has been asking her to dinner for weeks. He's kind, patient, and understands what it means to fight for justice in a system that doesn't always deliver it. "Maybe," Eleanor says, but her smile suggests maybe is closer to yes than she's ready to admit. 6 months after Richard's conviction, Eleanor finally visits Lake Michigan on a warm spring evening. The water stretches endlessly toward the horizon, reflecting the orange and pink of the sunset like a mirror painted by angels. She's not alone. David stands beside her, his presence comfortable and undemanding. They've been seeing each other for 2 months now. Quiet dinners, long walks, conversations that stretch late into the evening. "It's beautiful," David says, watching the waves lap against the shore. Eleanor nods, but she's not looking at the lake. She's looking at her life, really seeing it for the first time in years. Her business is growing steadily. Last week, she hired her first employee, a young woman fresh out of accounting school who reminds Eleanor of herself at that age, hopeful, determined, hungry to make a difference. Tanya is thriving too, managing Deshawn's auto shop and taking night classes in business administration. They talk every day, sharing the bond that can only exist between people who've been through hell together and emerged stronger. The nightmares about prison have faded. The crushing weight of others' expectations has lifted. Eleanor Brooks, at 59 years old, is finally becoming the woman she was meant to be. For the first time in years, Eleanor says aloud, her voice carrying across the water, "I am free." David takes her hand, warm and steady, in the evening air. "And I am enough," she continues, the words feeling like a prayer answered. The sun sinks below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of hope and redemption. Somewhere in the city behind them, people are making choices that will define their lives, some choosing courage, some choosing fear, some choosing love over judgment. Eleanor has made her choice. She chooses to believe in second chances, in the power of truth to survive even the deepest lies, and in a future bright enough to honor the son who died believing in her. The waves whisper against the shore, carrying away the last traces of her past and welcoming the woman she's become. Eleanor Brooks is finally home,